What's up? Hey, hello, everyone. Wow. So today we are back going to be talking about Survivor season 44, episode 8. So my name is Rachel.
And I'm Alyssa, and this episode of Survivor was certainly another episode. I feel like this was kind of one of those classic, like, you can tell from the editing that something is going to happen kind of episodes. So, yeah.
It was our first regular episode. Finally, everyone can vote. Everyone is able to be voted for. Regularness.
And it felt so good because I feel like this episode was still interesting despite the fact that there wasn't any like production based twist. Like the fact that there wasn't any production based twist was what happened happen.
Exactly. It's funny, like people are making memes online about like, oh, no twists, but actually there was a twist. It was that net in the immunity challenge was so twisted.
Ha! Yeah.
So we start off this episode. Ratu think that they are in charge now because it is a 4-3-3 split. Kane is basically saying, like, okay, it is our game to lose. The Ratu member is going to win this game unless we F it up. And I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. I don't really see a Ratu member winning the game.
Well, I was going to say, I commented at the beginning of this podcast, like, that's when you know something is going to happen because of the editing. And, like, when Kane was like, oh, like, a Ratu member is going to win, like, we're in so big control, I was like, oh, so a Ratu member is going home tonight. Just because as soon as someone gets cocky like this, you know that, like, the survivor gods are going to smite them. So,
Yeah, exactly. It's always that thing. If you get in a confessional anytime you saying I feel comfortable or I'm so great or I'm going to win this game, they're going to put that in there to make you look like a fool.
basically, so yeah. I don't feel bad for Kane, but I do feel bad for the other Ratu members that were cursed because of what Kane said.
But it seemed like the Ratu people, they were sort of on the same page. We also hear them saying, like, yeah, I'd be down to go, Final Four with you all. I'd be down to just get to the end together and duke it out. Which, okay, sure, if you have a majority alliance, that's good strategy, especially if you're in the top of the majority alliance. But I'm like, okay, that's really boring for us as the viewer. So I'm glad it didn't work out.
Well, I also feel like when you have 4 and then another group has 3 and there's a third group that has 3, you should be able to do the math and know that 6 is more than 4. So, like, if the other 2 groups want to team up against you, that would be really easy. And yeah.
Yeah, it's not like you had a like 6-2 majority or something. It's still very close numbers with 4-3-3. But we also see at the start of this episode, Heidi is trying to explain what happened with this advantage last week because we were like, Heidi, you shouldn't have played the advantage. She says it here in this episode. She couldn't have changed the outcome. She didn't think that she could have changed the outcome. So she says she took Lauren's vote because Lauren has 2. If it were to change something, Lauren could just play the other vote, which I'm like, okay, Heidi, this doesn't really make any sense. I feel like what we said last week, you should just not have used the advantage if you weren't going to do anything.
Yeah, I wonder if maybe it wasn't an option not to use the advantage. Like, yeah, it just felt weird. Or maybe she was doing the whole, like, oh, I did it so it wouldn't change anything just to Jam Jam's face instead of, like, telling him, like, oh no, I wanted you home to go home. So.
Yeah, like trying to backtrack, and that was her lie of backtracking, which is also interesting because, okay, her using this advantage, I guess it didn't really matter because Matt still went home. She didn't save Matt and Jam Jam, which could have been a good plan last week. But her using this advantage also doesn't really matter because no one seemed to be super angry at her. Last week, we were thinking, like, oh, Franny might be mad at her, Carolyn might be mad at her, Lauren might be mad at her, but it doesn't seem like anyone's super peeved that she did this move.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like Heidi is becoming a bigger player, and that worries me for her because I'm like, is she going out next episode and they just wanted to build her up a little before she goes out? Like, I don't know, because Heidi also had a pretty pivotal role to play this episode.
Exactly. So we also see Tika, they're in a good spot here. It's what we said last week, and we see confirmation this episode. Tika realizes that they're in a pretty good spot. They could try to play the middle moving forward and then continue flipping back and forth between the two groups of like Soka and Ratu. And I'm like, yes, okay. We love to see it. We love that you recognized it. And it's going to be interesting to see if they can truly play the middle or if, the war between Soka and Tika, Soka and Ratu, they'll actually realize, hey, the people in the middle are making all the decisions here.
I think it's interesting though because this week they split where Carson and Jam Jam both voted for Franny, but Carolyn voted for Brandon. So I'm like, is this part of their grand like playing the middle strategy?
I would think so. When we get to tribal council, I think their move is good. Basically, them voting the way they did, they have like plausible deniability, like, hey, Kane, Lauren, we're still with you. We didn't know that Brandon was going to go home. We didn't know that Danny had an idol was going to play it for Franny. Like, they could easily just be like, nah, we're still on your side. And like, Carolyn voting that way could just be like, okay, just in case something wacky happened, there's enough votes for that person they're voting for, Brandon, to go home if the idol isn't played or something else wacky happens. But I'm like, it's a good move for them. They can easily still play the middle because they didn't show their cards or like piss off one side or the other.
Which I think was exactly the point because I think like Carson or maybe it was Jam Jam said, like, we need to leave as many options open for us tomorrow as we can.
Exactly. So we get to the immunity challenge. They have to work in pairs. We saw a variation of this from last season where it's like this big obstacle course, it's elimination, and then there is one necklace at the end. I liked it this season how we actually saw them be able to pick their partners. Compared to last season, everyone was sort of like, dancing around the subject. Let's just draw sticks to pick partners. I'm glad at least we saw them pick partners this season rather than just leave it up to chance.
Yeah, and I think my favorite part about this episode was Carolyn just being like, "Yeah, I'll be with Carson." Like she has to know that like she's probably not going to win being paired up with Carson. But my like 5D chess, like big brain thinking is that Carolyn like took so long getting twisted in the net, like took forever doing her leg of the challenge because she didn't want to make Carson feel bad about not being able to compete, but she also like knew that he would not be able to win. So
Yeah, I bet Karsten is probably low key happy that Carolyn was so slow in the net, so then he wouldn't have to participate as much. But like, good for him though. He still tried in that rope netting, even though he was so sick. Like, that's very awesome of him to even try. He could have just been like, nah, we're already last place. I'm not going to go in.
yeah. And a side note to the Survivor editors, you can just tell us that someone is sick. Like we don't need a 30-second clip of them vomiting. I feel like I complained about this in maybe Survivor South Africa.
And the challenge.
And the challenge, but I was just like, y'all, I'm trying to eat my dinner here and you're showing me someone puking? Like, come on, just tell me that they're sick and let us move on.
Yeah, so I wish we got some more of reasoning, strategy, why people chose the partners they did. Like we saw a little bit from Franny saying like, okay, these might be partners that we're working with, but these might be partners we're working against. So like, how do you balance that when you are picking your partner here? Like, sure, you want a strong partner, but then that's someone you have to duke it out with at the end. Or maybe it's like you have to vote against your partner or you're both up for elimination or something. It's also interesting because I saw on Reddit people are sort of like joking, but I could totally see Survivor doing this. Is they're going to keep doing this partner twist, in the merge. You have to pick your partner to do an immunity challenge. And at one of these times, it's not just going to be a partner for the challenge, but it's going to be like what they did in Survivor South Africa with the Thai Destinies. And actually, the partner you pick, if they get voted out, you get voted out too.
The Thai Destinies thing was so stupid. But yeah, I feel like a lot of these pairs, we saw people kind of going for someone who was like comparable to them physically. Like Heidi and Jamie were together. Brandon was with, who was Brandon with? Another big
Yeah, so the
muscle
partners,
guy.
Brandon and Kane, Franny and Jam Jam, Carson and Carolyn, Danny and Lauren, and then Heidi and Jamie.
Yeah, I feel like the only one of those partners that I would say is like mismatched as far as like strength levels is Danny and Lauren.
Yeah, I guess I could see it. I guess depending on what the challenge is or what the strengths are, you might say like Franny and Jam Jam aren't the same as well, or Carson and Carolyn aren't the same. But if it's like a puzzle, then Carson's pulling the weight there. But I would agree, Brandon and Kane, they're both very tall and muscular. Heidi and Jamie are like similar height too and fit.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking physically, Carolyn and Carson were pretty close because, Carolyn kind of sucked at the challenge, and Carson also would have sucked because he was so ill. So, yeah.
So I also thought it was funny with Danny and Lauren being paired together. Danny wanted to vote Lauren out last week, but Danny says, "Yeah, I still want to vote her out, even though we're partnered here." And I thought it was nice for Lauren. We see that she's saying, "Oh, I'm probably the weakest link here. I'm going to be the weakest link in a partnership. I'm afraid people won't want to be partnered with me." And then she wins the whole thing. So I'm like, good for her.
That was also when I knew that Lauren would not be going home tonight. Because as soon as Danny was like, "Oh, I would still like to get Lauren out," I'm like, "Well, Lauren's safe." So,
I also loved with this challenge Carolyn screeching. Every time she does one of these physical things, she's always like screeching really, really loud. I love it.
yeah, she's just like, I love her. She's just so wholeheartedly herself, and it's great.
Yeah, and then juxtaposed to Carson quietly standing on the mat saying like, "Good job, Carolyn. Oh, I think you need to twist." Like so quietly cuz he's ill. I'm like, "Wow." And then her screeching so good.
Yeah. Yeah, it was
But
so good.
Carolyn, she also had itchiness happen that got a whole like 10-second clip of like the mud drying and making her itchy. It's like reminded me of dogs that like rub their butt on the floor when they get itchy.
Yeah. It's I feel like Carolyn is such a good character, and they give her screen time even when she doesn't really need screen time, just because she's such a good character and so fun to watch.
Yeah, the little personal moments, similar personal moment, Danny getting Jeff's attention and then farting super loud.
It was funny. I was watching this on my laptop, and I had switched to a different tab to check my email when like that moment happened, and I thought that Danny like just made a farting noise and not that he actually farted. And then when I rewatched it, I was like, "Oh, he like actually farted."
It's funny, they must have like there's no microphones there. Like, okay, if you're mic'd up, it'd be near your top. So like where's the boom mic? And how is the boom mic so good that it could pick up this sound? Or was his fart just so loud that the boom mic could pick it up?
I don't know, but I want to know.
Yeah, these are the questions. I'm like, was this an explosive one or did they just like amplify the sound effect for the TV show?
Yeah, I don't know.
So Lauren wins the challenge, and then we get back to camp. We see Danny and Heidi. They're coming up with a plan because basically Ratu is saying, okay, let's vote out Franny. Everyone's just going to put their votes on her. So we see Danny and Heidi coming up with their plan for not voting Franny out. So I feel like initially I'm like, okay, Danny, Heidi's plan, this is really good for them. They want to make a move. They're not just going to let themselves get voted out to get pagonged off or to just make it to the end and be the goat that gets to the end. And I feel like so many times in Survivor, we see the people in the minority alliance. They are just in self preservation mode where they aren't willing to try to make a move or team up with the other people on the outs. They just want to be the last one standing in their alliance so that they make it further in the game. But maybe they don't have any chance to win the game anymore. So I'm glad here, okay, even if this isn't the right time for a move like this, they still want to try to make a move and not just let their alliance members get voted out.
Yeah, and I also kind of love that like Danny had the choice to like make the safe move of just, using the idol on himself, and he chose not to do that because
Mm-hmm.
like playing the idol on someone else was what allowed them to pull off this blindside basically. So, yeah, props to Danny for not chickening out.
Exactly. We also see Danny tell Heidi about the idol, and he says, "Yeah, I have the hidden immunity idol. I will play it for Franny," which could have backfired so hard. I was a little bit nervous because then we see Heidi telling Tika that Danny has the idol and Danny has this plan and he's going to play the idol for Franny, which I feel like this is probably a blunder on Heidi's part. Like, there's no need to tell Tika that you have an idol in your group because that could just make them flip and target you, like Danny was worried about. Like, yo, Jam Jam could easily go to Brandon and say, yeah, they're voting for you. We need to switch the vote off of Franny since he's playing the idol for Franny and put it on Danny. Danny plays the idol for someone and then gets voted out because he played the idol for someone else. So I feel like Heidi could have kept this secret, and instead you just try to get the votes on your side organically. All else fails, I think. If you can't get 6 votes organically or the majority number of votes organically, then maybe you use the idol, but there's no need to tell them about the idol first thing.
Yeah, I wonder if part of it is because you hope that like the idol will be a selling point. Like, you can either be with us or against us, but we're going to get what we want. And then maybe that gets to a point where you don't even need to use the idol. Like if Jam Jam, Carson, and Carolyn were all solidly on their side, then Danny could have saved this idol and used it to make another big move later down the line. So maybe that was her hope in telling them.
Yeah, I guess I sort of see it similar to last week when we were talking about like Malcolm saying like we're playing 2 idols, we're voting for Philip. By telling them that we have an idol, we're playing it for Franny, let's all vote for, whoever, Brandon. It really doesn't incentivize them to flip their votes and to vote Brandon. So basically, they just allowed, like we saw, Carson and Jam Jam continue to be able to play the middle because they had the idol, they weren't incentivized to actually flip their votes. They kept it a secret, sure. They didn't spill the beans to Brandon and say, yeah, flip our votes. They're voting you out with an idol. But like they just allowed Tika to make this great move and ride the middle because they didn't have to show themselves by the way they were voting. Similar to like Matthew not voting and using the shot in the dark episode 1. Here, like we talked at the beginning, Jam Jam and Carson and even Carolyn too could say plausible deniability. We were still with you, like Lauren. So next week we can hang out together still.
Yeah. I guess it's just one of those things where I think people have an idea of how telling someone they have an idol will play out, and most of the time that's not how it actually plays out. So
yeah, so it is interesting, like what you were saying with Heidi getting more screen time. Sure, she's getting more screen time, but I feel like low key, like last week, playing the advantage the way she did, and then this week potentially getting Danny voted out if things were to go wrong. She could have effed over a bunch of people.
yeah. I mean, there's a lot of ways this plan could have gone wrong, but I think that's kind of the beauty of it too, because it's nice when everything that could go wrong does not actually go wrong.
Exactly. I like this move from Tika. I think it's smart of them to not spill the beans to Brandon and keep the idol knowledge a secret and continue to vote the way the OG plan was in voting Franny out. And I feel like by doing all of this, it really keeps them in with Ratu secretly while also being double agents. Um, so it will be interesting because I'm sure people would have read, okay, the number of Franny votes is more, and then you can count the number there and be like, okay, X number of people didn't vote with us. What was up?
Yeah, that would be fun. I would love to see like a confrontation where like Heidi goes to Jam Jam and Carson and is like, "What the hell, guys? You said you were going to vote with us." So maybe in keeping tight with Ratu, they kind of shot themselves in the foot.
So we get to tribal council. I thought it was very interesting. So we saw a few weeks ago, Brandon and Danny, they bond over being bros at the reward. And then they were talking about like, oh, men like us don't win this game. And his bro here, Danny, was the reason that Brandon got voted out. So I'm like, wow, that is sort of full circle. And also full circle, Brandon saves himself with an idol day 1, tribal 1. and then here he gets idled out.
Yeah, lots of full circle moments. I feel like Danny did not really stick with the Bros Alliance for very long at all.
I really liked Brandon's exit interview, though. I thought it was very interesting. He talked a lot about the Matt vote last week. They were thinking that Matt actually did have an hidden immunity idol, and it wasn't just the fake one because Matt kept asking about his bag. Like, oh, why would he continue to be asking about the bag if the idol wasn't real? Like, no one is that anxious over getting their shot in the dark because that's only a 1 in 6 chance. And so he was saying, like, yeah, maybe Matt could have been safe last week if he actually had the bag, and then they would have just done the safe move last week and maybe just voted Jam Jam out, because voting Matt out with an idol, if he had the idol, would have been more risky. So I'm like, dang, that sort of sucks. Like, that bag is causing so many issues.
Yeah, I guess it's one of those things where if you're desperate enough, even a 1 in 6 chance is a 1 in 6 chance. So
Yeah, so I'm very, very happy that the Danny and Heidi plan worked out. I would have been sort of bummed out if we saw Danny play the idol for someone else and then is voted out. Like, to have that goodwill to do that for someone and then it actually bites you in the butt, it would have been so sad.
yeah, I guess I kind of had the feeling that the idol play was going to be successful because someone at Tribal was like, this is when people are going to start playing flashier. And, playing an idol for someone else is a pretty flashy move. So, yeah.
I'm intrigued to see, though, next week and the weeks upcoming, Danny not having this idol anymore. Okay, does this help him? Does this hurt him? Low key, maybe it could hurt him because he is a big guy. And okay, if you're looking at immunity challenges, maybe you want to target Danny because now Brandon, the biggest dude, is out. Who are the more like threatening athletic people? I feel like your eyes are going to start to go to Danny there. So not having an idol anymore could hurt him, but yeah, I think maybe you could have just tried to sway the votes and tried to get Tika to flip with you rather than having to use the idol here as a crutch. Because now it didn't really matter where anyone voted because the idol negated those votes.
Maybe he's going to find another idol. Wouldn't be the first time.
Yeah, true. The only idol left in the game now, though, is Carolyn's idol and Jamie's fake idol, which I think makes it interesting for next week because it's a 3-3-3 split of OG numbers, which I feel like we've been seeing in previous seasons where it splits like this evenly, whether it's like 4-4-4, 3-3-3. So that's fascinating. Lauren might need to use her extra vote next week to make it like a 4-3-3, try to get some more numbers on their side. But I feel like for Tika, if you are in the middle right now, I would personally want to stay with Soka one more vote or maybe two more votes, but like at least one more, and you try to target either Lauren or Jamie. Lauren because she has that vote, Jamie because she has the idol. It doesn't make sense to leave these people in the game with these advantages. So then before flipping and voting out Danny, Heidi, or Franny, you need to try to get out Lauren or Jamie, I think.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting because Carolyn's idol, I'm pretty sure no one else knows about it still.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it would be fun to see kind of the chaos that she could cause, especially if she doesn't tell anyone that she has an idol. And like maybe she's the target next week and she's like, okay, bet. And they pull off another blindside because Carolyn has an idol.
Exactly. Or Carolyn can keep it all the way to the end and like do a Marianne and just be like, I had this for way longer and I never had to play it. No one even suspected me. And that would be such a boss move if you pulled it out at Final Tribal Council. Like, I found this on day 6. No one even knew I had it.
Yeah, I feel like that would probably work less for Carolyn than it would for Marianne, just because I feel like Carolyn isn't being brought up because she's seen as like such a non-threat and not necessarily because like she's been socially navigating.
Which I feel like bringing out an idol like that would give her a lot of credibility because people see her as a non-threat. So I feel like making a big move like that could look really good, especially like she would need to be more flashy. She would have to show that people that like, yeah, I'm not just the kooky lady here, but I have been playing the game. Here's how I've been playing the game and I've kept this secret. You think I'm an open book with all of my mannerisms and screeching, but no, I kept this a secret.
Yeah. So I guess we'll see. I just think that it's interesting that the idol that no one knows about is the idol that remains.
Me too. I am very excited for next week, what's to come. Always a fun time talking about Survivor, I think.
Yeah, and I think next week also just has so much possibility because of like the
Mhm.
3-3 split that you mentioned. 3-3-3, three threes. And also just I would love to see the chaos that happens next.
Me too. So let us know in the comments down below what you all thought of this episode. Were you happy that we finally got another, I guess, a non-twist episode? Everyone could vote. Everyone was up for elimination. There wasn't anything super wacky happening. You let the players play the game and you trust in your cast. You trust in your product. What did you think of the idol play? Were you nervous that it could have backfired and then Danny goes home playing the idol for someone else? Were you excited to see Franny and Matt's cute little faces towards each other at Tribal Council? So cute. So let us know in the comments down below, and we will see you all next week with another podcast. Bye
Bye.
bye.